What started as an ordinary accident at an upscale restaurant became the moment that exposed a family secret worth billions. When Jessica accidentally spilled wine on what seemed like just another customer, she had no idea she was about to discover that appearances can be deadly deceiving. This is a story about judgment, hidden identities, and how one moment of genuine kindness can reveal truths that change everything. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the mahogany floors of Palazzo Rosso, the kind of restaurant where a single appetizer cost more than most people made in a day. Jessica Martinez had been working there for 8 months, long enough to recognize the difference between old money and new money, between those who belonged and those who were trying too hard to fit in. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 26, Jessica was older than most of the other servers, but she needed this job more than they did. Her younger brother Carlos was in his second year of community college, and their mother's medical bills from her recent surgery were mounting faster than Jessica could count. The tips at Palazzo Rosso were substantial, but they came with a price. The clientele expected perfection, and the management made it clear that even the smallest mistake could cost you your position. That Friday evening in October, the restaurant buzzed with its usual mix of business executives, socialites, and tourists who had saved for months to experience what the food critics called culinary artistry. Jessica moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing plates of truffle risotto and glasses of wine that cost more per bottle than she made in a week. The evening had been going smoothly until table 12 arrived. A woman in her early 50s had been seated alone, dressed simply in a navy cardigan and modest black pants. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a worn leather purse that had clearly seen better years. She looked around the opulent dining room with wide eyes, occasionally glancing at the menu with the kind of careful attention that suggested she was calculating costs. Jessica noticed how the hostess had seated the woman at table 12, tucked away in a corner near the kitchen doors where the less desirable guests were usually placed. It was a subtle form of discrimination that happened regularly at Palazzo Rosso, though management would never admit it. The woman seemed oblivious to the slight, simply grateful for the elegant surroundings. When Jessica approached to take her order, the woman smiled warmly and asked questions about the menu with genuine curiosity rather than the demanding tone Jessica had grown accustomed to. She ordered the least expensive entree, a simple pasta dish, and asked for water instead of wine. Her hands shook slightly as she closed the menu, and Jessica caught her glancing at the prices one more time before confirming her selection. There was something endearing about the woman's obvious excitement to be dining somewhere so fancy. She took pictures of the breadbasket with her phone and seemed genuinely thrilled when Jessica brought her the complimentary amuse-bouche. It reminded Jessica of her own mother's reaction the one time they had splurged on dinner at a nice restaurant for her birthday. The trouble started when Jessica was serving wine to the adjacent table, a group of investment bankers celebrating a successful merger. As she leaned across to pour the final glass, her elbow caught the edge of the wine bottle she had set down moments earlier. Time seemed to slow as the bottle tipped, sending a cascade of deep red Barolo across the white tablecloth and directly onto the simple woman at table 12. The wine soaked through her cardigan and splashed across her modest outfit, turning the navy fabric dark with expensive liquid. The entire section fell silent, and Jessica felt her heart plummet to her stomach. In 8 months of working at Palazzo Rosso, she had never made such a catastrophic mistake. The woman looked down at her ruined clothes with shock, but before Jessica could even begin to apologize, she heard the unmistakable sound of laughter from the investment banker's table. One of them, a man in his 40s with perfectly styled hair and a suit that probably cost more than Jessica's monthly salary, was openly chuckling. "Well, at least now she looks like she belongs here," he said loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear. "Nothing says fine dining like wearing your dinner." His companions joined in the laughter, and Jessica felt heat rise in her cheeks as she realized the cruel nature of their amusement. What happened next surprised everyone, including Jessica herself. Instead of focusing on her own mortification and the certain job loss that awaited her, she found herself moving protectively toward the woman who had been humiliated through no fault of her own. "I am so incredibly sorry," Jessica said, her voice carrying across the now quiet dining room. "This was completely my fault, and I take full responsibility." She grabbed clean napkins from a nearby station and knelt beside the woman's chair, gently dabbing at the wine stains while being careful not to make them worse. The woman looked up at Jessica with eyes that seemed surprisingly calm given the circumstances. "Accidents happen, dear," she said softly. "Please don't worry about it." But Jessica was worried about more than just the spilled wine. She could see the way other diners were staring, some with sympathy but others with the same cruel amusement as the investment bankers. She recognized the look of someone who already felt out of place being made to feel even more unwelcome. "Let me get you a new cardigan from our coat check," Jessica offered. "And of course your meal tonight is completely on the house, I insist." The woman started to protest, but Jessica was already signaling to her manager, Anthony Ritchie, who was approaching with the thunderous expression she had been dreading. Anthony was known for his perfectionism and his absolute intolerance for mistakes that might damage the restaurant's reputation. "What exactly happened here?" Anthony demanded, his Italian accent thick with anger as he surveyed the scene. His eyes moved from the wine-stained table to Jessica's mortified face to the woman's ruined outfit.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"I accidentally knocked over a wine bottle while serving table 13, Jessica explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've already apologized to the customer and offered to comp her meal. I'd also like to pay for dry cleaning or replacement of her clothes." Anthony's expression darkened further. At Palazzo Rosso, servers were expected to cover the costs of their mistakes, and Jessica knew her offer would likely exceed her entire paycheck for the week. But looking at the woman's kind face and remembering the cruel laughter from the other table, she knew it was the right thing to do. "That won't be necessary," the woman said quietly, standing up and gathering her purse. "I think it's probably best if I just go home and change." "Absolutely not," Jessica said firmly, surprising herself with her conviction. "You came here to enjoy a nice dinner and that's exactly what's going to happen. Please let me fix this." The investment banker who had made the cruel comment earlier was now watching the exchange with obvious entertainment. "Maybe this is a sign that some people should stick to places more suited to their budget," he said to his companions, not bothering to lower his voice. Jessica felt something snap inside her. In 8 months of dealing with entitled customers and subtle class discrimination, she had always maintained her professional composure. But seeing this kind woman humiliated for no reason other than her appearance brought out a protective instinct she didn't know she possessed. "Sir," Jessica said, turning to address the investment banker directly, "I think there's been enough commentary for one evening. Perhaps you could focus on your own table." The man's eyebrows rose in surprise at being challenged by a server. "Excuse me, I think you need to remember your place here." "My place," Jessica replied evenly, "is ensuring that every customer feels welcome and respected in this restaurant, something that seems to have been forgotten at your table." The dining room was now completely silent, with every customer and staff member watching the confrontation unfold. Anthony looked like he was about to have a stroke, and Jessica knew she had just committed career suicide. But as she looked at the woman's grateful expression, she realized she didn't care about the consequences. "I think we should all just calm down," the woman said gently, placing a hand on Jessica's arm. "There's no need for anyone to lose their job over spilled wine." But it was too late for de-escalation. Anthony was already making calculations about damage control and customer relations. The investment bankers were clearly offended at being called out by service staff, and Jessica had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Miss Martinez," Anthony said through gritted teeth, "please report to my office immediately." As Jessica prepared to face what was certainly going to be her termination, the woman did something unexpected. She reached into her worn leather purse and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Jessica's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Not many people would have stood up for a stranger like that. Jessica glanced down at the card. The name printed in simple black letters read Margaret Chen. Below it was a phone number and an address in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. Something about the card seemed oddly formal for someone dressed so simply, but before Jessica could process it fully, Anthony was escorting her away from the dining room. As she walked toward what she was certain would be her firing, Jessica caught a glimpse of Margaret Chen gathering her things to leave. The woman moved with quiet dignity despite her wine-stained clothes, and Jessica felt a pang of regret that her mistake had ruined what was clearly meant to be a special evening out. 20 minutes later, Jessica emerged from Anthony's office with her final paycheck and instructions never to return to Palazzo Rosso. Anthony had made it clear that her unprofessional behavior and inability to maintain appropriate boundaries with customers made her unsuitable for their establishment. The fact that she had challenged a high-spending customer was unforgivable, regardless of the circumstances. As Jessica cleaned out her small locker in the staff area, her fellow servers offered sympathetic looks but kept their distance. They all needed their jobs, and being associated with someone who had just been fired for insubordination wasn't a risk any of them could afford to take. Walking to her car in the employee parking lot, Jessica felt the full weight of what had just happened. She had lost her job, her income, and her ability to help with her family's mounting expenses, all for defending a woman she didn't even know. The rational part of her brain suggested she had made a terrible mistake, but her heart told her she would make the same choice again. As she sat in her car, Jessica pulled out the business card Margaret Chen had given her. She studied it more carefully now, noting the expensive cardstock and embossed lettering. The address was in Hillcrest Heights, a neighborhood where houses started at several $1,000,000. It seemed impossible that the simply dressed woman who had ordered the cheapest item on the menu could live in such an exclusive area. Curious now, Jessica used her phone to search for Margaret Chen and the Hillcrest Heights address. What she found made her hands tremble as she read the screen. The address belonged to a massive estate that had been featured in architectural magazines as one of the city's most impressive private residences. But it wasn't just any wealthy family's home. According to the property records, the estate belonged to Richard Chen, founder and CEO of Chen Industries, one of the largest conglomerates in the country. His business empire included everything from tech companies to real estate developments to restaurant chains. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as she realized exactly who Richard Chen was. He was the man who owned Palazzo Rosso. As Jessica sat in the parking lot processing this revelation, she began to understand that nothing about the evening had been what it seemed. Margaret Chen wasn't just a simply dressed woman enjoying a rare night out at a fancy restaurant. She was the daughter of the man who owned the establishment that had just fired Jessica for defending her. The questions multiplied in Jessica's mind. Had Margaret been testing the restaurant? Had she deliberately dressed down to see how she would be treated? And if so, what did Jessica's defense of her mean for the future of everyone involved? As she started her car and prepared to drive home to face the difficult conversation about losing her job, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that the evening's events were far from over. Margaret Chen's parting words echoed in her memory. Not many people would have stood up for a stranger like that. Something told Jessica that those words were about to take on a meaning she couldn't yet imagine. Jessica spent a sleepless night researching everything she could find about Richard Chen and his family. The more she learned, the more incredible the situation became. Richard Chen had built his empire from nothing, starting with a single food truck in Chinatown 30 years ago. His daughter Margaret was listed as Vice President of Community Relations for Chen Industries, responsible for evaluating company properties and ensuring they met the family's standards for customer service and ethical treatment. The irony wasn't lost on Jessica that she had been fired from a restaurant owned by the father of the woman she had defended. But what troubled her more was wondering whether the entire evening had been some kind of elaborate test that she had somehow failed by losing her composure with the other customers. 3 days passed with no word from Margaret Chen. Jessica had called the number on the business card twice, but both times it went to a professional voicemail system that gave no indication of when calls might be returned. She had started filling out applications for other service positions, though none offered the kind of income she had been earning at Palazzo Rosso. On Wednesday morning, as Jessica was getting ready for a job interview at a chain restaurant across town, her phone rang. The caller ID showed the number from Margaret's business card. "Hello Jessica, this is Margaret Chen. I was wondering if you might have time to meet with me today." Jessica's heart raced. "Of course, where would you like to meet? Would noon at Café Luna on 5th Street work for you? It's much more casual than our last encounter." Café Luna was a small coffee shop in the Arts District, the kind of place where students and freelancers worked on laptops, and the most expensive item on the menu was $8. It was about as far from Palazzo Rosso's atmosphere as possible. Jessica arrived 15 minutes early and spotted Margaret immediately. She was sitting at a corner table dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like the woman Jessica had originally perceived her to be than someone connected to a billion-dollar empire. When Margaret smiled and waved her over, Jessica felt some of her nervousness ease. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said as Jessica sat down. "I imagine you have questions about what happened the other night." "A few," Jessica admitted. "Starting with whether you knew who owned the restaurant when you walked in." Margaret laughed, a genuine sound that made her seem younger. "I knew, but probably not for the reasons you're thinking. I eat at all of our properties regularly, usually without anyone knowing who I am. It's the only way to get an honest assessment of how customers are actually being treated." She paused to sip her coffee before continuing. What I didn't expect was to be treated so dismissively by the hostess, or to have wine spilled on me, or to witness such blatant cruelty from other customers. And I certainly didn't expect a server to risk her job defending someone she'd never met. Jessica studied Margaret's face, trying to read her intentions. So it was a test. Not intentionally, at least not the way you're thinking. I dress down when I visit our properties because I want to see how staff treat customers who don't appear wealthy or influential. It's a window into the real culture of a business. Margaret's expression grew serious. What happened that night revealed some very troubling things about Palazzo Rosso's environment. Over the next hour, Margaret explained how Chen Industries approached business ethics. Her father had never forgotten his humble beginnings or the discrimination he had faced as a young immigrant entrepreneur. Every property in their portfolio was expected to maintain standards that went beyond profit margins to include respect for all customers regardless of their apparent social status. The way those men laughed at me, the way the hostess seated me in the corner, the way your manager prioritized their comfort over basic human decency, Margaret said. None of that represents what our family stands for. Jessica felt a chill as she realized the implications. What's going to happen to the restaurant? That depends partly on what happens next, Margaret replied. My father and I have been discussing Palazzo Rosso's future since Friday night. The management has clearly created a culture that tolerates discrimination, and that's unacceptable. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. But first I want to talk about you. Do you know why I'm really here? Jessica shook her head, though she was beginning to suspect this conversation was heading somewhere she hadn't anticipated. You lost your job because you stood up for what was right, even when it cost you personally. You saw someone being humiliated and you chose to act, despite knowing the consequences. Margaret opened the folder and slid a document across the table. That's exactly the kind of person we need in our organization. Jessica looked down at what appeared to be a job offer. The title read Director of Customer Experience, Chen Industries Hospitality Division. The salary listed made her eyes widen. It was more than twice what she had been making at Palazzo Rosso. I don't understand, Jessica said. You want to offer me a job because I spilled wine on you. I want to offer you a job because of how you handled what happened after you spilled wine on me, Margaret corrected. Jessica, we've been looking for someone to head up a new initiative across all our hospitality properties. Someone who understands service from the ground up but also has the courage to challenge systems that aren't working. Margaret explained that Chen Industries was launching a comprehensive review of customer service practices across their restaurant chain, hotel properties, and entertainment venues. They needed someone to lead training programs, develop new policies, and ensure that every customer felt valued regardless of their appearance or perceived wealth. The position would involve traveling to properties across the country, working directly with management and staff to create better environments for both employees and customers. You'd have the authority to recommend significant changes, including personnel decisions when necessary. Jessica felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was being offered. Why me? I don't have experience in corporate management or training development. You have something more valuable than experience, Margaret replied. You have integrity and the instinct to do what's right even when it's difficult. Those qualities can't be taught, but management skills can be learned. The offer included not just the substantial salary but also comprehensive benefits, education assistance, and a signing bonus that would cover her family's immediate financial needs. It was an opportunity that would transform not just Jessica's career but her entire life trajectory. There's one more thing, Margaret added. We'd like you to start with Palazzo Rosso. Anthony Ritchie has been terminated as manager, and we're restructuring the entire operation. You'd work with the new management team to implement changes that ensure what happened to both of us never happens to anyone else. Jessica thought about the investment bankers who had laughed at Margaret's expense, about the hostess who had automatically seated her in the corner, about Anthony's cold dismissal of basic human decency. The idea of being part of creating real change in that environment was both intimidating and exciting. What about the other servers? I don't want anyone to lose their jobs because of what happened, Margaret smiled. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need in this role. The frontline staff will be retrained, not replaced. Most of them were just following the culture that had been established by management. Give them better leadership and clear expectations and they'll rise to meet them. As Jessica read through the detailed job description and benefit package, she realized this opportunity represented everything she had dreamed of but never thought possible. The chance to make a real difference in how people were treated, the financial security to help her family and pursue her own goals, and the platform to ensure that others wouldn't face the kind of discrimination she had witnessed. I need to ask, Jessica said. If I hadn't defended you that night, would this conversation be happening? Margaret considered the question carefully. Probably not. We would have quietly made changes to Palazzo Rosso's management and moved on. But seeing someone willing to sacrifice their livelihood for a stranger's dignity, that's rare. It told us something about your character that no resume or interview could reveal. She paused, then added, my father always says that how people treat those who can do nothing for them reveals their true nature. You thought I was just someone who couldn't afford to belong in that restaurant, and you defended me anyway. That's the kind of person we want representing our values. Jessica signed the contract that afternoon. Within a week she was working with Chen Industries' human resources team to develop new training protocols for customer service across the hospitality division. Her first assignment was indeed Palazzo Rosso, where she worked with the new management team to create an environment where every customer felt welcome regardless of their appearance or background. The changes went beyond training sessions and policy updates. The restaurant implemented a new seating system that eliminated preferential treatment based on customer appearance. Staff were empowered to address discrimination from other customers, and management was required to support employees who stood up for respectful treatment of all guests. 6 months later, Palazzo Rosso had become a model for inclusive hospitality within the Chen Industries portfolio. Customer satisfaction scores had improved dramatically, and staff turnover had dropped to almost zero. The investment bankers who had mocked Margaret never returned, but the restaurant was busier than ever with customers who appreciated the welcoming atmosphere. Jessica's role expanded beyond individual properties to include developing corporate-wide standards for customer treatment. She traveled to Chen Industries hotels in major cities, restaurant chains in suburban markets, and entertainment venues in tourist destinations, always with the same mission of ensuring every customer felt valued and respected. The most rewarding part of her new position was training other employees to recognize and address discrimination. She shared her own story regularly, explaining how defending a stranger had led to discovering her true calling. Many staff members admitted they had witnessed unfair treatment of customers, but hadn't known how to intervene without risking their jobs. The key, Jessica would tell training groups, is remembering that everyone who walks through our doors is someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's entire world. Their clothes or car or accent don't change their fundamental worth as human beings. A year after the wine spill incident, Jessica was promoted to Vice President of Customer Experience for the entire Chen Industries portfolio. Her responsibilities now included overseeing service standards across hundreds of properties and thousands of employees. The shy girl who had needed a job to help her family had become a corporate executive with the power to shape how an entire inn treated its customers. Margaret Chen remained both a mentor and friend throughout Jessica's rapid rise within the company. She often joined Jessica for visits to properties, sometimes still dressing simply to observe authentic customer interactions. The two women had developed a partnership based on their shared commitment to treating everyone with dignity regardless of their circumstances. Richard Chen himself had taken notice of Jessica's work. At the company's annual meeting, he publicly credited her with helping Chen Industries live up to its founding values of respect and inclusion. Sometimes, he told the assembled executives, the most important business decisions come from following your conscience rather than your profit margins. The impact of Jessica's work extended beyond Chen Industries properties. Other hospitality companies began adopting similar training programs and policies after seeing the positive results in customer satisfaction and employee retention. Industry publications featured articles about the Chen Standard for inclusive customer service, and Jessica was invited to speak at conferences about creating welcoming environments in luxury establishments. But the change that meant the most to Jessica was personal. Her brother Carlos graduated from community college and was accepted to a 4-year university with his tuition covered by Chen Industries' employee family education program. Her mother's medical bills were paid in full, and the family had moved to a comfortable home in a safe neighborhood. Every time Jessica walked into a Chen Industries property, she thought about that night at Palazzo Rosso when everything changed. A simple accident had revealed character, both her own and others, in ways that transformed multiple lives. The wine stain on Margaret's cardigan had washed out, but the impact of that evening continued to ripple outward. Years later, when young employees asked Jessica for career advice, she always told them the same thing: treat every person you encounter with the respect you'd want for someone you love. You never know when standing up for what's right will open doors you never imagined possible. The business card Margaret had pressed into her hand that night remained framed on Jessica's office wall, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary moments become the foundation for extraordinary change. And sometimes, spilling wine on the right person at exactly the right moment can reveal that kindness and courage are worth more than any amount of money. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.